On the road. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Torn Tuesday, your weekly dose of all things Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. This is the longest running Lord of the Rings show. Not a
Indeed, it
podcast,
is.
because you can't download it on a podcast app,
That's
although we
right.
should one
That's
of these
right.
days. I'm your host,
I would.
Justin, along with
Uh,
my friend right there, Clifford Broadway.
Hello, everybody. I would say yes to that. Maybe having a audio only version of our previous episodes, or maybe a select curated library of some of our best interviews with some of our best guests. And that's right, folks. You're here. You're here at theonering.net. Once again, welcome back to our worldwide audience who are all here for the world and the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Welcome to our little corner of Arda. Try to say that 5 times fast. Ladies and gentlemen, here on the internet, it's our little corner of Arda, and it's our little Tuesday afternoon jaunt. Welcome to the Tuesday jaunt. And now we're going to have a little conversation about the mischief that is happening with the ongoing strike, the other mischief that is happening with revealing statements from the studios about their use of artificial intelligence, something obviously which is tied in to that Venn diagram about why the strike is even happening with the writers and the actors. And we're going to have quite an interesting show with news, gossip, and other things. Welcome, Justin. It is so good to see you, sir. Welcome.
It's good to see you. Yeah, we
How,
are up. It
where's our
is
chat? I'm looking in
day
YouTube. I'm looking for our chat.
99 of the
Oh,
writer's strike. So tomorrow is day 100, which I think approaches a actual legal contract deadline that might change things. Who knows if things change this week? But today is day 99. Who would have? No one ever thought that a writer's strike would last 100 days. Um,
I wouldn't have thought. Do we have YouTube chat enabled? I'm looking for
well, yeah, we should.
the
Oh, we're losing Cliff. Well, Cliff's internet
anybody.
is having some jiggery pokery of it. But yeah, it is. It is. And the writers that are striking every day,
Oh,
every week, include the Rings of Power writers, whose last gig was Amazon's Rings of Power.
that's right.
Usually, I'd say a lot of people who go on strike and go to the picket lines are fired up enough because of their most recent job was so traumatic and dramatic that it has caused them so much pain and hurt that it has inspired
Yes.
workers to hit the strike line. Look, a lot of people striking isn't for a lot of people. Hitting the picket lines and stuff like that. A lot of people are just staying home and keeping a low profile. But the Rings of Power writers are out there every day, every week, striking
Yeah.
at all the different
Yeah.
studios. And they wouldn't be doing that
Indeed.
unless they had a really bad time with their most recent employer, which happens to be Amazon Prime.
I know. I know. It's the truth. It's the truth, I tell you. Guess who showed up with our previous host, Chelsea Schwartz? It was Billy Boyd who showed up marching with her in solidarity with SAG AFTRA right outside the gates of their studio just the other day. That just happened literally yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. And before that, they had Sean Astin out there in solidarity with the actors, of course, because he's up there with the negotiating committee with SAG-AFTRA. I am very, very pleased to have seen so many of the Lord of the Rings actors coming together and being out there on the picket lines. It does my heart good to see that, really. Don't you
That's
think,
awesome.
Justin? Be be that as it may, there is a lot at stake in these big conversations with creatives about how artists as performers are going to have their likenesses used against their will. There's a lot of ebooks and some really interesting scandal moments that have happened in the world of electronic publishing in the past 48 hours. Justin, did you know that? Websites that have been caught scanning unauthorized without the author's, without any knowledge, getting full novels and work data scraping it for their benefit without the original authors knowing. And it was I think it was called Prose Prose Books online, and they shuttered. They're down now because of the scandal of authors crying out against having kind of like us using Zoom right now. Our conversation right now is going to be data mined against our will by Zoom, the corporation, doing our actual live Torn Tuesday. It's the exact same thing happening to us, even as I open my mouth and speak, that I am training against my will another AI at some corporate level because I'm using Zoom. So no wonder some of these fantasy and science fiction authors, wonderful to support your independent authors. And that's really great that some of those e-publishing sites have been around as a place to allow the furthering of the careers of these young authors and these talented writers. But to do this against their will is unconscionable.
I think you're a little more hyped up than you need to be. Content was not
Really?
being stolen. It was a website that basically counted all the words in a book and gave you how many sentences, how many poems, how many
Yeah.
rhymes, how many stanzas, how many
How
paragraphs.
many adverbs, the percentage of how many words were actually using
Right.
ly adverbs, the
The
percentage of passive voice.
the
Yeah, it was a
technical
statistical
stuff
approach. They
of
were doing
books.
that was discovered, that was disclosed. They had other intentions and taking other non-disclosed things that the authors did not approve of. So that's beyond the pale of what the original purpose of that website was. Scandal, I'm telling you. So, hey, here we are.
Oh, Cliff! I think Cliff's internet's going to be in and out all week, so we can keep going. Chat room, I fixed the YouTube chat. You should be able to refresh or kill or close the app on your phone if you're watching on a device, and then reopen it and rejoin, so the YouTube chat will work. I already see it. Wheat Bix, yes, someone already scraped Torn Tuesday subtitles. Yes, everything is searchable at this point. And I have to remind you, and this got a huge response, a huge groan from the audience at San Diego Comic-Con, 1,000 fans in the room. And I reminded everybody that the algorithms, the AI algorithms, have scraped the entire web. So everything you posted on the Torn message boards 11 years ago when you were 13 are part of the training data on the AI. So when it comes to AI writing stuff, your Shire posts on our message boards when you were a little tween are what the AI has been trained on. So there you go. Good luck with that. AI has its uses for some things, but definitely not for others, and definitely not for high level fantasy storytelling. The best fantasy storytelling are the stories that hold a mirror up to the human condition. And Tolkien understood this, but artificial intelligence doesn't. Our AI is just a regurgitator. But we'll go into that later in the show. I've got some headlines, and since Cliff's internet is coming in and out, maybe he wants to join via his phone, off not on Wi-Fi. Maybe he has a good data plan. If he joins, he'll join. But I'm watching the chat room. Thank you for keeping me company here. Weepick says Google search doesn't work without scraping. I think the line is when that data has been used and money is being made without the owners getting some or approving that final step. That's the whole thing. Wheatbix. I wish I could feature this on the screen, but my YouTube backend isn't working because of all the chat chicanery. But look, everyone. I think there's a lot of people that want to call the actors and the writers Luddites. Like the march of technology is ceaseless. It will continue moving on. You can't stop it. they're not asking to stop it. They're asking for a piece of the pie. If you're going to hire a writer to write the show Bible or maybe the pilot script of a TV show, and then you're going to use an AI to script the following 5 episodes, the writer should get paid. Maybe not as much as the first one, but the writer there should be money exchanged if you are creating new value and new costs with AI trained on someone else's work. And that's all they're fighting for. No one's trying to stop AI. And if you watch, there's a documentary I highly recommend. There's a documentary, I believe it's on Showtime or Stars or Epic or something like that, about Marlon Brando. It's called Listen to Me, Marlon. Marlon Brando, arguably the greatest actor who ever lived. That's not an understatement. If you watch every interview, every documentary, if you listen to any actor anywhere of all time, they will all say Marlon Brando was the best that ever was. There is a documentary that's told in the first person because Marlon Brando loved technology and he recorded himself every day, little audio log diaries on tape recorders. He had movie cameras. Marlon Brando was one of the first actors to voluntarily get himself digitally scanned in the 1970s. And then in the 1980s when the technology improved for Tron. And then in the 1990s when the technology improved for digital, Marlon Brando had himself scanned with the computer, expecting that in the future he could be brought back to life digitally. He also expected that if the technology came while he was alive, he could not show up to set and he would just get paid. That's the whole thing. Marlon wanted to do the least amount of work and get paid the most amount of money. So he was all about AI and digital things and replicate his voice and replicate his visual, but pay him. And that's all anybody's asking for with these strikes. We're on day 100 of the strike, and everybody's just saying, look, we don't want to stop this. We know it's here. Just pay us for the creative excellence that you've trained the data on. Yes, the Johnny Depp is a Brando fan. Marlon Brando better than Gary Oldman? We can have a debate about many actors over many things. I'm just repeating what every single actor that has won an Oscar, the greatest actors of all the generations, have all said the same thing about Marlon Brando. He was, and may always be the best of the actors. And the fact that he had the foresight to accept the coming AI revolution and prepare for it. Anyway, so there's a documentary called Listen to Me, Marlon. There's a trailer, great trailer on YouTube. You can find it. I highly recommend it because it's wonderful. So, that's technology. Time marches on, and technology doesn't stop, and innovation doesn't stop. They'll never admit it because they're in the middle of a contract negotiation. But let's be honest, there's a lot of writers we've talked to over the years, that are they just want to get their ideas out. And, a lot of times the punctuation might be off, or the idea, the concept, the words come out, and maybe they're a little jumbled because the idea just needed to be out on paper through your fingers. AI is the type of tool that can help that, to help clean up a script. And we'll go into how Amazon has been using AI in a minute. XOXO 2000 in the chat room says, I always knew streaming was hurting actors' money. Network TV is where they made money, and also through reruns. It's how the Friends cast will forever be millionaires. Yeah, correct. Same with Seinfeld. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. Also, let me bring this up. Just a reminder: these are the quality writers that were on Rings of Power. These are the writers that have been on the picket line, folks. Jennifer Hutchinson from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, Helen Shang from Hannibal. There's 3 of my favorite shows ever. Jason Cahill from *Halt and Catch Fire*, a Lee Pace TV show on AMC networks. Again, 4 out of 4. *Halt and Catch Fire* is one of my favorite shows ever. Lee Pace is stunning in that. Justin Doble comes from Fringe. You guys remember Fringe with Denethor himself and Gimli. Denethor and Gimli are in Fringe, and of course he was on Stranger Things. Brian Cogman, the picture on the right, of course, is Game of Thrones. He was the third in command. He was the lead writer, the lore master, and eventually worked his way up to directing some episodes. And Stephanie Folsom from Toy Story 4. That is an all-star list of credits. You want to talk about Payne and McKay not having any credits to their name, which is true. They don't have any credits to their name. But the smartest people always hire the best people. And that's what Amazon did. They have the showrunners that supposedly are, love Lord of the Rings and love Tolkien. But then they surrounded the showrunners with A-list, super A-list television writing. Yes, Anonymous Girl, they have a writer for Hannibal. Helen Shang is the writer from Hannibal, listed right there. Helen is one of the strongest proponents of this strike. Helen has been on the strike line every week since it started. Helen has been one of the most vocal, not in the press, but if you meet her in person, she's been one of the most vocal. And Helen did not get her episodes included in season 1. Helen's episode got bumped to season 2. And as I understand it, the current deal that they're striking against is that a writer doesn't get paid until their episode airs. Helen Shang wrote 1 or 2 episodes of Rings of Power 4 years ago. And because her episode got bumped to season 2, she hasn't been paid in full for it. She has to wait till next September, 2024. Remember when production was halted in 2020? That means the scripts were done in 2019. And her episode won't come out till 2024. Folks, 5 years. This is why the writers are striking. Imagine doing work 5 years ago and not getting paid for the job until 5 years later. This is awful. Yes, Kaylin Griffin, I'm just repeating what's in the chat. This is awful. And this is the world that writers are striking against. And it doesn't mean Amazon is any worse than any other company, because all the companies work with the same union contract that was negotiated 10 years ago. Otaku, interesting. I suspect that Helen's episode concerns Celebrimbor and Narvi. I'm not... I appreciate some of our friends in the community, like Fellowship of Fans, that want to have weekly leaks. I'm telling you guys, we're saving a bunch of stuff until this writer strike is done, because I want the fan reaction to some of our scoops to be so important that if the studio hears what the fans react to what we have to say, maybe they can hire the writers to rewrite and reshoot some stuff before the show comes out. So I'm just gonna hold that. But to go along with the chat room suspecting that Helen Shang's episode, again, the episode that got bumped from season 1 into season 2, I believe it's episode 2 or 3. And I heard this from Patrick himself. I believe Helen's episode is episode 2 or 3. I'm not going to give you spoilers, but let's just go with the hypothetical in the chat room. Helen Shang is on the strike line every week. She's a strike captain. She's helping coordinate, organize, keeping people hydrated in this hot heat, and letting people know. So, Helen's episode, your theory in the chat room is Helen's episode concerns Celebrimbor and Narvi. I'm not going to comment on that, but I will say this. Helen was hired because of her work on Hannibal. Her job specifically on Hannibal was to write the storyline between Richard Armitage and Mads Mikkelsen. Yes, the Red Dragon. The relationship of Hannibal Lecter and the Red Dragon was the storyline that Helen Shang was responsible for on Hannibal. If you're familiar with the Hannibal lore, there are several, allusions to mutual admiration between the Red Dragon and Hannibal, mutual respect, mutual distrust, mutual jealousy, a little bit of homoeroticism. All of these things were included in the Hannibal TV show on NBC. So if Helen, her previous job to Rings of Power was Hannibal, she was responsible for Richard Armitage, Thorin Oakenshield himself. Richard Armitage as the Red Dragon with Hannibal Lecter, and the competitive nature of the Red Dragon and Hannibal, and the homoerotic narcissism plus respect between those characters was so on display in the Hannibal TV show. That's what they hired Helen Shang from. Now, think about what Otaku Senpai in the chat room just said about Celebrimbor and Narvi. If Helen just did that Red Dragon Hannibal storyline, and she jumps into Rings of Power, and they say, hey, we got these characters, Celebrimbor and Narvi. That's I'm just gonna let your imaginations start playing with that. It is very exciting to me. It is very exciting to me, especially her work and her reputation, Helen Shang as a writer in Rings of Power. It's really exciting, the idea that she specifically would be in charge of Celebrimbor and Narvi's relationship. So, there you go. I highly recommend watching Hannibal. It's an NBC show. It wasn't on paid TV. It was literally on NBC. It's definitely a rated R show. It's a network television show, so there's tons of episodes. So, make it your late summer project, right? Get through 3 episodes, every couple nights or something like that. Hannibal, wonderful show, wonderful performances, great writing, and all that stuff. So, will there be Man, I am so glad Cliff's not here. Will there be homoerotic undertones between any of the characters in Rings of Power? I think Cliff would say absolutely not. We don't want that. Tolkien didn't write it that way. He was Catholic, etc. Valid. That's a valid point. But also, you all watched the same show I watched. You all saw the comments that the producers made that I read. You know, like they want to modernize this show. It's a TV show. Could Celebrimbor and Narvi? I don't know. I don't know. Cliff is in the chat room because his internet sucks. Cliff, if you have comments, please post them in the chat room. I'll read them aloud. I wish he was here because speaking of Narvi, again, I'll say it again. Helen Shang, Hannibal, Red Dragon, Hannibal Lecter, homoerotic undertones, violence, creativity, respect, admiration, jealousy, all of those things at play. Helen Shang writing the episodes, possibly writing the episodes for Celebrimbor and Narvi. Folks, here he is. According to Fellowship of Fans, Kevin Eldon is Narvi. This was the big scoop this weekend from Fellowship of Fans. This is Narvi. Now, let's stay on topic here. This is an older looking character. Folks, season 1 was full of young looking actors. Let's be honest, right? Season 1 of Rings of Power, the entire cast looked young, looked handsome, looked beautiful, looked ageless, right? Even during Owain, everybody has it. This Narvi. Remember when Celebrimbor was recast by Charles? What's his name? And everybody said, "Oh my gosh, that is an old-looking Celebrimbor." Folks, this is Narvi. And if Celebrimbor and Narvi are supposed to have a lot to do together, Otaku in the chat room says Celebrimbor in the show does not look ageless. This is supposedly Narvi, his dwarf counterpoint. I don't know how else to say it. Anonymous Girl says, yes, no, not really. The Stranger and Celebrimbor looked older. But yeah, out of a cast of 30 people, two people looked like older gentlemen. And this actor obviously fits the bill in that older looking segment. Okay? So let's start to put the pieces together, folks. I'm just going to let your imagination stew on this, okay? If this is Narvi and he looks like an older gentleman, Narvi does a lot of business with Celebrimbor, according to the books and according to the texts. Celebrimbor, played by Charles Edwards, is an older looking gentleman amongst a giant cast of young people. So Narvi and Celebrimbor play older gentlemen. They have things to do together. Narvi, of course, builds the magic doors, the secret back door into Moria, into Khazad-dûm. And now add in that nice little comment in the chat room that Helen Shang, the writer from Hannibal, responsible for the Red Dragon storyline, is writing the Celebrimbor Narvi storyline. So she's very familiar with male storylines. Two men doing what they do best together and at odds with each other. Some fascinating, really interesting potential here from a writing standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, from I know Cliff doesn't want to hear this, but from the standpoint of expanding our understanding of these characters. So there you go. Yes. Anonymous Girl says, isn't Galadriel supposed to be older than Celebrimbor technically? Yes. I believe so, right? But we don't have Cliff, the lore expert, here. He's in the chat room. Maybe he can answer. Cliff says this actor will be covered in tons of latex effects makeup, so there's not much to discern from his unadorned human appearance here. I don't know, man. Like, older Durin was unrecognizable, yes, but Owain, you can see Owain through his dwarf makeup as Durin, and you definitely can see Sophia Namviti as Disa. It's interesting how Sophia's they didn't put much prosthetics on Sophia compared to all the other dwarves. During the 7th in the chat room, I just realized that the fact that the showrunners need to modernize Tolkien means they have zero understanding of the timelessness of Tolkien's writings. It's a two-way street, right? I think, and this is one of the things that we highlighted when they announced that the showrunners were Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne. One of the things we highlighted here on this show was because they're inexperienced, because they don't have any previous projects on IMDb, because they've never showrun or directed or produced anything, not even a YouTube video, they wouldn't know when to push back against studio mandates and studio notes and studio rules. They because they're new and they've never done this before, they wouldn't know to say to hold the studio back and say, when the studio says, hey, we need to modernize this, they need to have the strength to say, you don't need to modernize Tolkien. He's the best-selling author of the 20th century. Only the Holy Bible sold more than Tolkien. You're going to change that? You're going to update that? You don't need updating that. Tolkien wrote a mythology for all the ages. But you need strong leadership to be able to push against that studio mandate to say modernize. You know, and I think we've talked about this before, but you guys know how much of a champion I was for the last 5 years on the idea of young Galadriel. She's not married. She doesn't have a kid. Young Galadriel's dating. She's finding her way. We started to get that. And then they pulled back. And I feel like the execution didn't happen. The execution wasn't really great, because now I'm not happy because I didn't get what I wanted, and everybody else isn't happy because it hinted at something that they didn't want to see. So I think the showrunners need to just commit. They just need to commit. They need to know when to stop, and they need to know when to push. But by being green, by not having the experience, they don't know when to push, and they don't know when to pull, and they don't know when to stop, and they don't know when to go. So you get this like halfway between everything. And I think that's what a lot of the reviews have yet to kind of like focus on, which is you can't go halfway. Then you get a half-liked show. Aravandi says, having watched Twilight and regretted it, I can tell you that the Hobbit love triangle with Tauriel and Keeley and Legolas was nowhere near as bad as the love triangle in Twilight. This is very correct, and I saw all the Twilights as well. Shouldn't the showrunners have an idea of what hills they do and don't want to die on? Yes, but what I'm saying is because they're new, they don't know what hills are worth dying on. That's what I'm saying. You don't know what's worth going to the mat for and what's worth backing off and say, all right, you know what, you guys want to do that, fine. And that only comes from experience, right? This is the genius of the Lord of the Rings and Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson surrounded himself with producers that fought for him when he needed to be fought for. And as we've learned from many of our episodes in the past with the maker, the behind the scenes of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the production was set up where Peter Jackson had his people and the studio had their people. So if the studio hired a visual effects supervisor and the studio paid for that, Peter Jackson got to hire a visual effects supervisor equally powerful. And then if the studio hired another producer to get stuff done, Peter Jackson was able to hire another producer to get stuff done. So there was always an equality between what the producer wants, or what the director wants, in this case showrunners, and what the studio wants. And so there was never a disparity of control. And sure, the debates got loud, but there was never an element of just absolute control. And that's not what we have on Rings of Power. And the best example I can give to that is when the writer's strike started 100 days ago, the showrunners walked off the set, as they are WGA, and Amazon continued filming for another 2 months. Amazon literally said, we don't need the showrunners. We can finish shooting the show. It's kind of a red flag. And that kind of tells you who's really in control and whose show this really is. So there you, yeah. So that's the big scoop with Narvi. Kevin, what's his name? Kevin Eldon is Narvi. And he has a lot to do with Celebrimbor, and there's a lot of storyline between Celebrimbor and Narvi. Season 2, as far as we've heard, season 2 is Celebrimbor's season. This is his season to shine. This is Celebrimbor's season. So I'm excited to see what potentially writer Helen Shang from Hannibal has in store for us on this part. Moving on. Other news. Lord of the Rings is coming to Prime Video. Folks, do you remember you've all watched the behind the scenes, the appendices of Lord of the Rings, the extended editions? And remember how they made a big deal about how did New Line finance a $300 million trilogy all at once? And you guys remember the stories of how New Line, and specifically Mark Ordesky, went and pre-sold it to international territories, right? He would go to international countries, and he would say, hey, we're going to make Lord of the Rings. It's going to be this awesome big thing. Do you want first rights? And then every country had a bidding war amongst the film production distributors in that country. So fast forward 25 years, and here we are. The French company that won the rights to distribute Lord of the Rings 25 years ago in those amazing pre-sales for this trilogy, before anyone had seen a foot of film, those distribution rights, are still held in France by that company, as well as all the other European territories. Now, Amazon has signed an exclusive deal with Metropolitan Film Export to bring all of their movies, including The Lord of the Rings, from the rights that they pre-purchased 25 years ago. Metropolitan Film Export is now supplying films for streaming video on Prime Video. I think Amazon will continue to do these deals, and you will see in the coming months during this strike, you will see a lot more of these types of deals. I have an invite from Clifford Broadway. Let's see if we can bring him in, folks. 1, 2, 3. Let's go. Hello, Clifford. How are you today?
Well, hello there, everybody. How are you?
All right. You know what?
Hey,
I talked
what's
for
going on?
I talked for too long on this. I'm gonna just give you the floor and let you respond to anything I just said.
Well, I just got a picture of Billy Boyd, who was there marching with SAG-AFTRA on the picket line today. I was just just received that. I would love to send it to you, Justin. I'm gonna have to send it to you so we can show everybody on the interwebs. What should I say immediately in response to the first thing, Justin? There is no way, honestly, that even a gay man like me would be interested in needless. I mean, look, it's not needless to court. It is all right. It is needless to court controversy, but it. Oh boy, I don't want to get into the weeds with this, but Helen Shang's excellent curriculum vitae, her excellent experience with other previous TV shows, may or may not have any categorical, implementation or inferences into her other work. I mean, going from one project to another, I'm sure a writer is expected to bring a variety of viewpoints and creative applications in their imagination. I'm assuming a good writer with a limitless imagination does not have to stick to the wheelhouse of doing the same thing on the next show that they did on the previous hit show that they did. So, I don't think that I don't think you should have been left alone for so long, Justin, to speculate this way about this causality. And there you are, left by yourself, and you're speculating, oh, maybe Helen's going to write all these interesting, LGBT laced undercurrents for characters into the Lord of the Rings world. And I'm like, no, not necessarily. And not necessarily. I mean, what, right, who? It's okay.
You don't. Let me ask you this: based on the show that you watched and the comments that you've heard from the producers and the showrunners, do you put it past them to possibly go down that route? Maybe not as explicitly, but do you think that's not off the table?
I don't know anything anymore because of the degree with which they mishandled the seduction of power thematic construct. The whole seduction is supposed to be a seduction of power against a person's better nature. Celebrimbor is seduced by the idea of remaking himself in the glory of his grandfather's image. Celebrimbor is not seduced physically or emotionally. He's seduced intellectually. And because
Narvi's a smart kid.
You guys are so funny. You guys in the chat, help me out here. All right. Nah. Anyway.
Okay, don't want to see it. Let's be clear. You don't want to see that. But
no, not as much. However, having those particular main characters, you could have others. You could have plenty of other characters. Perhaps we could say the newly invented characters that were just, cut from whole cloth for the show itself. You can have a lot of interesting placement of those themes, and you can explore those mature themes in ways that wouldn't break with the canon of existing characters that Tolkien never wrote about within that context. But you know, the there is there's a different kind of romance, okay, between Celebrimbor and Anatar. It's a different kind of romance. It's not even romance. It's like it is a it's a swindle. It's a swindle. It's a con. It's a job as much as it is a morality play for Celebrimbor, who finds himself up against the wall of his grandfather's legacy and up against the wall of his own ego, wondering what his legacy is going to be like and what he's going to leave behind in the world. Uh, I was just recently watching an excellent video by Matt, Nerd of the Rings, that was just released on the subject of Feanor and the three Silmarils, and you guys should definitely watch it if you haven't already. And it's about Feanor having this consciousness that even though the Silmarils were the greatest artistic creation in all of Arda, and the Silmarils represented the greatest and most significant craftsmanship ever seen in the creation of the planet or in all of Arda, look at this. Feanor could still not come to terms that the light that illuminated the three jewels was not of his own creation. And that burned his ass. That burned his ego. So it's about Professor Tolkien giving Celebrimbor, in parallel with Feanor, a really, really, really strong ego check, a cautionary check. But Anatar is introduced into the story not to seduce Celebrimbor with, I can understand you as an intimate partner. No, Anatar presents himself to Celebrimbor as, I can understand you as an intimate partner in craft. I can bring you the missing elements to raise you up in your craft, your ambition. It wasn't in the romance department where Celebrimbor was seduced. It was his idea of his own legacy. It's fascinating.
Are you saying that Anatar uh, plays everything kind of like Oppenheimer does with all of the other great scientists in the world, saying, "Come with me and let's do something greater than all of us could do individually"? Edward
There
Teller
might
did not need Robert Oppenheimer, but Oppenheimer assembled this team of all-star physicists to
hmm,
do that thing, the Manhattan Project.
yep,
Are there any parallels between Anatar and Robert Oppenheimer?
could be interesting, but I don't know. Anatar's job was not like Robert Oppenheimer's.
I don't know.
Anatar's
They kind of
job,
both build the thing that destroys the world.
they both build the ultimate weapon. No, Anatar's greater scheme was completely not in any parallel to Robert J. Oppenheimer, who wasn't in it to create a pattern of world domination for himself, uh, that's funny. I tell you what, the main motivations are different, as Wheat Bix says. I agree. You know what's more interesting to me is we could have spent a lot of season one with Anatar having conversations with Celebrimbor and not with Halbrand having his conversations with Galadriel. But instead, if there was more center stage conversations of Anatar trying to talk to Elrond, trying to get into Lindon, and then being a failure at that, and Anatar all of a sudden struggling with his own wanting to redeem himself. If you really want to get on that train that Halbrand was something of a composite of Myron when he was a previous Valar, form, a previous Maiar, excuse me, before Sauron was Sauron and he was Myron. If you want to talk about him trying to redeem himself, I certainly would have visualized season 1 with Anatar trying and failing to get redemption from Gil-galad and Elrond, getting kicked out of Lindon, and then going second base to Celebrimbor instead to try to redeem himself, and then getting lost in his own ideas of creating a system of order and power the way that Sauron wanted it to do. Imagine that Anatar could have been your lead as he's buffeted around at different places in Middle Earth, with some elves telling him yes and some elves telling him no. And all the while, this feeds his inner frustration. And Anatar, instead of turning towards the light of redemption, ends up becoming super corrupted. How about that? If you want to blame, that would have been an interesting alternative season 1, to see that Anatar might have tried to do the Sauron redemption tour, and then because he got the door slammed in his face and was treated rudely by Gil-galad or whatever, intriguing. It could have been that is not what Professor Tolkien wrote. I'm just saying it's a lot closer to what Professor Tolkien wrote.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the idea that we're going to have Celebrimbor now having a new relationship with another character in season 2 that may not present as Halbrand. It might be Sauron in a different fake disguise.
But what about Narvi?
Being Anatar.
What about Narvi?
Well, Narvi's relationship with Celebrimbor is going to be a really interesting subcurrent, because Narvi is going to be at odds with his king, Durin. So Narvi, I imagine, will have all these scenes with Sophia Nomvete, with
There's
Disa.
There's a lot of jokes that
Prince
you can
Durin.
have with the back doors and secret doors. Narvi makes a secret magic door. Let's be honest. He makes a back door in Moria. Why?
I don't know.
Why does he make a back door?
I think that they're going to replace that small gate that we saw with the big grand one, which the Fellowship knows.
I don't think it's a replacement. I do. It's a secret door for a secret purpose. And eventually
it wasn't secret. It was visible from the outside, even when it was shut.
All right.
It was just a small little door, though. A small little tiny door. I think they're going to make a big grand door that represents a more openness of their culture and willingness to be trading.
But the culture is already collapsing on itself. King Durin has already said, "Hey, enough with this dwarf nonsense. I'm stripping you of your title. You're out of line." The dwarves are set up at the end of season 1, not opening themselves, but closing further in on themselves. This is a secret door. And this has to be a secret door.
No, let's hypothesize that
at the show that they've made, the show that they gave us, I'm just responding to that. There's no way that this door is not a secret door, because they're closing in on themselves.
Why does it have to be a secret door? It's not secret. Narvi is there and is in the scripted words on the mountain face that Celebrimbor and he made that gate, and it's a huge gate.
Right. Yeah. So, but they both.
So we know it will be built at some point in time, maybe season 3 or 4.
Right, but it's built with a mutual admiration or a mutual distrust. Who knows? I'm assuming that I would like to assume that the elder Durin is replaced by the younger Prince Durin, and then he changes the foreign policy with the elves and makes that bigger door. Fair enough.
That's what I think is going to happen.
Before we move on, because we got so much more to talk about, I just want to acknowledge the wonderful conversation that the chat room is having, and I just want to say, for the record, that I think the strength of Tolkien's writing was that everybody could see what they want in him, in his writing, and not everything is explicit. And things are purposely left open, and things are purposely left unsaid, unprinted, unwritten, and unseen on screen. So that's why I think I don't have an issue with some shippers, and I don't have an issue with people thinking
No, it's fine.
that
Yeah, it's fine.
Samwise is bi, and him and Frodo had a thing, and then Samwise decides to have a hetero relationship and build a family. And why is Uncle Bilbo, always single his whole life? Well, why is Uncle Frodo single his whole life? There's just a lot of undertones and undercurrents that aren't explicit, and they aren't canon, but neither are they exclusive. And I think the power of Tolkien is that people can bring their own lived experience into these
Yes.
stories. So
Yes.
by not saying no to something, also by not saying yes to something, it means it's open to our interpretation.
That certainly does go a long way towards explaining why the Germans, prior to the rise of the Nazi Party, had a very different interpretation of The Hobbit and its thematic approach, thinking that it was commentary on their Aryan nationality and dwarves, etc., etc. No wonder. Even people can get a really twisted and strange, wrong idea because of that openness of interpretation.
And so when
Yes.
when I when I talk about what Helen Chang did with the Red Dragon story, Hannibal and
Mm-hmm.
Red Dragon, Richard Armitage at his second best, because Thorin Oakenshield is his lifetime best. Uh, it's not explicit. They're not in a homosexual relationship. There is an undercurrent of homoeroticism, and that could be respect for their talents of violence and murder and mayhem and art and culture and everything else that that show is about. And I'm saying that they don't need it. I'm not saying that Helen needs to bring all that into Middle Earth, but I'm saying a skilled writer like Helen can introduce common themes where guys like me can see what I want to see in the Celebrimbor and Narvi relationship, and then Cliff can see what he wants to see in the Celebrimbor and Narvi relationship. And that's a writing style that is truer to Tolkien than anything else. When we all can see what we want to see in these stories.
Applicability over allegory.
Bingo. And I think they tried to do that with Haladriel. They didn't quite get it right, and it's caused a lot of tension in the fandom. With Haladriel doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
Well,
It does exist. It doesn't exist. We can debate this for the next year. And I think they've done Tolkien wrong by not doing it right. But I think someone of the caliber of Helen, who's doing episode 2 or 3 of season 2, whose episode got bumped from season 1, who
yes.
may be doing Celebrimbor and Narvi's storyline, I'm
Mm.
saying a writer of her talent can introduce a way of storytelling where everyone wins because the storytelling is just great. So that's all. There's room in this fandom
Okay.
for all of it. And like you said, Cliff,
I get it.
allegory versus applicability.
Indeed. Indeed.
All
That's
right,
definitely one way to say it.
moving on. We got an update from what we announced last week. As you remember, last week Neil Gaiman put up his Kickstarter for The Good Omens, a graphic novel illustrated by Colleen Duran, who we missed at Comic-Con this year. Hope you feel better, Colleen. She's a friend
Yes.
of Torn. She's a friend of Ringer's Lord of the Fans. She's featured in your documentary, Cliff. 1 week later, it is the #1 comics campaign in Kickstarter history. $1.6 million, Cliff.
Wow.
$1.6 million.
Super brilliant.
Every
The biggest comic Kickstarter in the history ever. That's
So,
huge.
congrats to Colleen
Really
Duran and Neil Gaiman and the estate of Terry Pratchett. But that's not the only Kickstarter news. And thank you to
Terribly
the chat
exciting,
room
isn't it?
for reminding us that at Gen Con this last weekend, Free League Publishing, who make a Dungeons and Dragons version 5e role-playing version of Lord of the Rings, officially licensed by the Lord of the Rings people and Embracer, and
Mm-hmm.
it is the official One Ring RPG and Lord of the Rings role-playing 5th edition, a new epic campaign module delving into the depths of Khazad-dûm. This brand new
Wow.
Kickstarter launches in 2 weeks, and is called Moria: The Long Dark. It is a good time to be in the fantasy role playing game,
Yes, it sure is. Yes, it
um,
is.
because you've got Dungeons and Dragons, with an awesome Dungeons and Dragons movie. By the way, you guys should watch Dungeons and Dragons the movie. It's streaming now. You got
Oh,
this.
guess what? Guess what was the biggest hit at the Gen Con weekend that just happened? Our friend Matt, Nerd of the Rings, and many others, including our very famous TikToker, Don Marshall, who loves all the Tolkien stuff as much as we do, they hit the big nerdy gamers convention, the tabletop and strategy gamers convention called Gen Con. And you know what happened there? I'm telling you, not only did they all play a lot of Magic, Lord of the Rings, Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, but the thing that you just said, they launched all these big new games, and these tabletop games that are getting these licenses were also announced at Gen Con. It's very exciting. I'm sure he's going to come out with some good interviews that he's got with some people while he was there.
Yeah, so Gen Con is the big role playing RPG magic thing.
All
Oh, not
tabletop
ready.
games.
Folks, this is the video of the Magic the Gathering One Ring card when the kid found it. When the dude found the card. Look at his hand shaking. He knows he's holding a $2 million card. His hand is shaking. He needs to send. He sent it into an official grading company that puts it under hard plastic glass and grades it. His hand was shaking, and then here's a video of him
Oh my
actually
gosh.
um, selling the card to Post Malone backstage at a concert. Post Malone purchases it for $2.2 million United States currency, which is about $2.6 million
That's
Canadian. So the
very
official selling
exciting.
price is Canadian dollars, Canadian $2.6 million. Look at that. Post Malone changing this guy's life.
He just pulled that magic card out of that pack. It was so crazy, so crazy.
There it is.
Well,
It's
they created the
beautiful.
monster. They created a specific rarity of a specific ring that was supposed to be as rare as the mythic object itself in the secondary world in the pages of the fiction.
So the
And so they
Lord
did. They
of the One
created the
Ring,
rarity of it. Yeah.
yeah, Post Malone is now officially the
The Lord of
Lord
the Rings.
of the Ring.
So strange and funny. Isn't it strange and funny? I find it fascinating, really. It's
Well, if
fascinating.
the writers and actors could use that kind of money, they could have opened some packs of cards like we all did, looking
Yes.
looking for that card. And that's not the only valuable card. There are still about 1,900 valuable. We're talking $10,000 or more. $10,000 cards out there. This one was the big one, the 2.6 million, but there's still around 1,900 valuable One Ring Dwarven, One Ring Men, and One Ring Elven cards that you
Yep.
can still pick up in the green boxes, in the green packs.
RJ McReady says, "Let's cast Post Malone as Tom Bombadil."
You know what?
Because
I'm
that's
okay with
funny.
that.
That's totally funny. I love that
The
idea.
weirder Rings of Power can get, the better, honestly. Um, so
That's hilarious.
so
Oh my God,
and
stunt casting is funny, isn't it?
Speaking of Magic the Gathering, there has been a lot of talk that the value of these cards would go down because the thought was that Magic would declare that the One Ring card itself, which there are in many packs, is too overpowered because it's the One Ring. Well, we have an update coming out of Gen Con, August 7th, banned and restricted announcement. Now,
Yep, that's right.
Magic the
Banned and
Gathering
restricted
sends
cards.
its experts its
Yes.
experts to Gen Con and Magic Con, and they sent over. They went to Europe last week, and then they went to Gen Con this week, and they watched all the games being played. They watched all the different types of games being played. They watched actual decks, custom decks being assembled, and they have determined. Let me see if I can find it. While it is true, I quote
saw
Magic
this
the Gathering,
earlier.
while it is true that these two cards made big waves at the Pro Tour and within the format, these cards, the One Ring particularly, can fit into a variety of decks and spread the macro archetype strategies to comfortably compete within the format without overshadowing everything else present in modern gaming. Games can frequently be decided by having the One Ring in play for multiple turns, but the bar for such cards being too powerful, too strong, is very high. So, that said, they continue on. This is official for Magic. We are not taking any action against cards from Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth today. We do want to be clear that these cards are on our radar. Despite the healthy tournament results and seemingly plenty of wiggle room to explore in the format, the play rates of these cards are still high. We'll continue to monitor the long-term fun of the One Ring card. So there you have it, folks. It's official. The One Ring card is not going anywhere. The value still remains high. You can still play them in official competitive decks. You can play, and of course, those are just professional rules. You can play at home.
Let us remind the audience quickly that there are many other cards than just that serialized one that was worth $2-point-something million.
Yeah, there's 1,900 serialized cards, and then there's tens of thousands of One Ring cards. Cliff, did you pull a One Ring card in any of your?
Oh yeah, I've got a couple of them. Yes.
You got see, it's not.
I've got a couple of
serialized.
One Rings.
It's not. No,
I mean,
worth $10,000.
There's one that comes in the bundle. You can buy it. It's a single copy. You'll get it foil, and it comes in every single bundle. You'll always get one. It's not that. However,
they aren't banned. It's what they found is the One Ring. Yeah. People, there were a lot of gamers that have expected the Magic the Gathering to ban the One Ring card because it might be too powerful in normal gameplay. And what they have discovered is they are not banning the card. It is not overpowering, and so the value maintains, and cards are still selling for $10,000.
I was just opening up my decks of Magic cards right here to show you guys that there's even a token, a One Ring token. It is not a card. It's the perforated one that actually you could tear off the top of it. You know what I'm saying? You guys have seen the perforated card?
The only thing I put in hard plastic is my Bill the Pony.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Who loves
now let me
Bill
show you
the
this. Hey you guys, do you see this? See the one? Let me show you guys. Take a look. This is not called the One Ring. It's just called the Ring. And this is a perforated item. Okay? And it has these different abilities. And it has first this ability, and then on the next turn, that ability. Then on the next turn, when the ring tempts you, that ability. And then the next time the ring tempts you, the last ability is revealed. So you just slide it all down. This is not really what we're talking about. It's not the copy of the One Ring that they were talking about in that article.
Us? Oh my gosh, what a waste of airtime.
No. Because
you said you pulled a One Ring.
I do have that, but there's big distinctions. It's right here behind me in this box.
Oh,
this is a separate one that's also quickly available.
That's basically the one pinky ring. Thank you very much.
Oh well, here it is. Do you want to see this beautiful One Ring?
Yeah, I want to see.
You want to see the beautiful foil ring? Here it is.
Footage.
Show that beautiful beam footage.
And
see, there's lots of these. There's lots of these tokens that you use.
That's not pinky to be ring. That's not the One Ring card that we keep talking about. While Cliff is looking at it, I'll quickly mention Baldur's Gate 3 is a new game based on Dungeons & Dragons. Baldur's Gate video games are based on Dungeons & Dragons. And the funny thing is, this weekend on launch, it passed the new Harry Potter game to have 800,000 players this weekend on Sunday.
Oh wow.
800,000 players playing D&D Baldur's Gate 3. And the funny part is that the producer of the game said he told them they should expect 100,000 max.
Oh
So
really?
the actual producers of Baldur's Gate 3 expected the game to have 100,000 people max at launch, and instead it got 800,000 players max. So the servers must have been melting. Um,
It must have been.
but
That's crazy pants.
the reason I wanted to bring that up is we have a brand new D&D RPG 5e Kickstarter starting in a couple weeks from Free League Publishing. We have Baldur's Gate 3 is crushing records, more than anyone ever thought, by 8x, 8,000%. And Magic is crushing it, and they're keeping the One Ring in play, and things are huge. So the question is, the question really is, Cliff, if
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate 3 is doing these numbers with an RPG, EA is making Middle Earth games. Does
Yeah.
does EA start to explore the idea of a role playing game, a video game, not a big MMORPG like Amazon is doing? Does EA make an RPG like Baldur's Gate 3, but for Middle Earth? And that's the question I have for you in the chat room. Do you want an offline, no microtransactions, no pay to win, no none of that, no free to play? It's literally just a classic role playing game like Final Fantasy or Baldur's Gate, but set in Middle Earth. It's obvious that that format of game is now popular again. So
Yeah. I would say, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Amazon's making an MMO RPG, which is multi online, multiplayer, massive multiplayer online RPG, which means it's like you're paying monthly basically to keep playing it, and it's like a persistent world, and you log in and you play with your friends. Baldur's Gate 3 that just released is not an online MMO. It's literally just an RPG game that you play single player by yourself. That's it. It's a classic single player RPG video game like Final Fantasy used to be. The question is, do you, the audience, want to see a Middle Earth RPG? Cliff, did you find that card?
I did. I've also been informed by SAG-AFTRA representatives that talking about Dungeons and Dragons just now is struck. We're talking about struck work. Okay?
That yeah. If you're an
Yes.
actor, don't talk about it. That's fine. We can talk about it all day as fans. Sean Astin told us specifically, as fans, talk about the things you love as much as you want.
Right.
But if you're an
That's true.
actor if you were an actor paid in the Dungeons and Dragons
I have
movie, then you don't talk about it.
I have a future in the Screen Actors Guild because I have been
But you
Taft
didn't
Heart
act
lead.
in D&D. So
But
fantastic.
I'm in a must-pay situation. The next job I do as an actor, I will force to be paid my dues into the union, and I will automatically join the union. So because of that, I'm going to refrain. Personally, I am going to refrain from talking about struck work. But you can talk about it what you like, because you don't intend to join the union in the future, but I do.
It
So
has nothing
that's
to
it.
do
That's
with
the
it.
difference.
It has little to do
Yes,
with
it does.
intent. You didn't work on the
It does.
movie, so you have
No,
nothing to do
that's
with it.
okay. That's also true, but it's also
This is
finer
from Sean
distinctions.
Astin himself. So
Here it is.
there it
Here
is.
it is.
That is the One
Here
Ring
it is.
card that anybody can play. That they can still play.
It's different from this. There's different versions of it. See, here's Bilbo's ring. Here's the One Ring, which is again different from the other token I showed you, which was just called the Ring. So here they are, and this is the one that's probably worth the most money right now. Although I'm fascinated by these cards to such a degree, I wonder how much money I'm going to get selling all these beautiful foil collectible cards online. I'm really
Interesting comment
excited
from
by
Brian
that.
Martin. He says, I find Lord of the Rings video games suffer the same problems as old Dragonlance campaign settings. Too many stories told in books that take away much of the mystery of the world.
Mm, indeed.
Are you saying that too many stories? And let me ask you, are you saying that too many of the same stories being told over and over again? Or are you saying all of the new games take away all the magic from the original books because they keep adding and adding to it?
I
So,
think I know what he means. Okay.
um, so
Okay.
that's the
Well,
question. So, I'm just looking at the chat room. Like, do you guys want an RPG game like
I would
Baldur's
love that.
Gate in
It
Lord
sounds
of the
great to
Rings?
me.
I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds like it's a good time to be a role playing fan. With Magic, with D&D, with Free League Publishing, you got
Yeah.
good movies. You got Baldur's Gate 3 coming out. Everything's coming up D&D right now.
It sure
Um,
is.
yeah, everything is coming up D&D. I hope they do a sequel to the movie, because
Do you know what else is? Do you know
Covington
what?
says just not done by EA. Well,
Yeah.
EA's got the gaming license.
They've got the license, so what can you do about that?
What can
Do you
you
know
do
not
about that?
there's also news coming out of the Ralph Bakshi world of animation, one of his famous animated fantasy adventure films, a big sword and sorcery animated epic called Fire and Ice, very familiar to all of you by being inspired by the paintings and the artwork of Frank Frazetta, who is one of the most famous of all time fantasy illustrators and painters of all time. Uh, Forgive my redundant patterns of speech. They have a new Fire and Ice miniatures tabletop game, which is going to start its own Kickstarter in just a couple of weeks. And that was just announced today, I believe, on Ralph Bakshi's official Twitter account. Animator, director legend Ralph Bakshi is now, for the first time, starting to license some of his most famous fantasy characters that are not related to Lord of the Rings. And again, it's all in the tabletop gaming environment where there's a lot of activity. Guess who else is thrilled? Star Wars fans also got their eyeballs on this, which was also released at Gen Con this weekend. If you like playing
That's great.
Disney
Er-
villainous, there's the Star Wars villainous, and here's
well,
the
there's no Lord
brand
of the
new
Rings villainous.
expansion.
Aerovandi in the chat room says, I'd play a Middle Earth
Oh,
video game styled like Breath of the Wild. You
so
know,
cool. I
I
love
just
Breath of the
started
Wild.
getting
That's
into
fun.
Tears of the Kingdom, and it is so huge and so intimidating, and I am completely enthralled. Like, Tears of the Kingdom really is the greatest game out. It is just, it's a whole world. There's no tutorial. You literally, like, they dump you in the world and they say, figure it out, kid. And you got to figure it out. And you can go anywhere you want,
That's
in
really
any
cool.
direction until the horizon. And I'm in awe of how big and how incredible the Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, we got a
And
few minutes left. I promised, we started off the show talking a little bit about the WGA and AI and the writer strike and 100.
mm,
Well, this is what Amazon is promoting in their AI. You can sign up right now. Amazon Web Services is their big cloud. That's what the Amazon cloud is. It's Amazon Web Services, and they are promoting generative AI. That's generative artificial intelligence. That is using artificial intelligence to generate things that don't exist. When they say generative AI, that's exactly what the writers and actors are want a piece of. They want a piece of the generative AI. If you generate something with someone's likeness or voice, then they should be paid. So generative AI is the keyword that everyone, there's many forms of AI. There's chat GPT, there's all this other stuff, but generative AI is what is everybody. And there's a whole website talking about choose the right model for your use case, security and privacy, scale, build, train, and deploy, how customers are embracing generative AI with healthcare, with productivity, with mapping the human brain, how Canva generates images using AI. No artist involved. There you can literally just make images. This isn't the first time that Amazon has used AI. Here's something from 2013, 10 years ago. Amazon built Storyteller, one of the first AI things that Amazon ever published. Amazon Storyteller takes your script. Basically, you upload a script, and it shows you, it makes storyboards based on your script. It looks at your script, it looks at the words in the script, and it creates storyboards. Like if you say there's 3 characters in a scene, it automatically draws 3 characters. If it says there's an explosion in the screen or a weapon in the screen, it automatically draws a weapon. So Amazon has been in this game for 10 years, creating storyboards automatically using AI instead of hiring artists like John Howe and Alan Lee for Lord of the Rings. Now, Cliff, I think we all agree that having John Howe and Alan Lee do the storyboards of Lord of the Rings are one of the reasons it's the greatest trilogy of all time.
I agree, very much so. I also think you should look at the thing that I just sent you. We just found out that Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog 2, is reportedly going to start shooting all of its scenes without actors this September in the middle of the strike, just next month.
Yeah, motion capture. You know that motion capture aren't union actors anyway. So if Amazon was doing this,
no,
AI
wait a minute, wait,
storyboard,
that doesn't dismiss the ethical problem of the studio doing that.
Right.
That in no way clears them of wrongdoing.
Let's show what Amazon Studio specifically is using AI. Now, for 10 years, they've been using, they've had automatic storyboard things. So basically, Amazon replaced talented artists like John Howe and Alan Lee with a storyboard AI tool. Fast forward 10 years, folks. Here's a new, let me give you an example. Animated 3D videos from text in minutes. This is not related to Amazon, let me be clear. This is a brand new startup. It was a South by Southwest 2023 winner. So this company debuted their technology at South by Southwest earlier this year and was a technical winner. Obviously, they're trying to get a bunch of people to use it. Animated 3D videos. They're pitching it as animated storyboards based on your script. You upload your script and it gives you animated scenes, animated storyboards. And let me tell you, let's see how they market this thing. Simplifying the complex, unlimited updates and iterations, no special skills required. Again, let me remind you folks, John Howe, they are replacing John Howe and Alan Lee.
Oh gosh.
With these types of tools. No special skills were required. Look at this.
No.
Here's a promotion thing. Illustrators take 6 weeks to produce 1 minute of on-screen animation. 6 weeks to produce 1 minute of on-screen animation. Pre-production and story development take 50% of filmmaking time.
Yes.
There's a reason for that, but we'll get into that in a minute. Pre-visualization costs an average of $10,000 a minute with a team of illustrators. 84% of film industry comes from inward investment and co-productions. It's 3 to 5 years to create what you see on screen. Only about 3% of stories make it to the screen. It's a lot of money into the drain. Here is an AI animated storyboard company telling you it's a lot of money down the drain. They're telling you that getting storyboards from John Howe and Alan Lee and the artists at Weta Workshop is money down the drain. It's right there on their website. For creatives, by creatives.
Mm-hmm.
Watch this. A forest, night. A fire camp under the moonlight. In the middle of a dark forest, a cooking pot is placed on an unlit bonfire. Kate sits near the bonfire on a bench made of a tree trunk. Nick stands next to the bonfire. A fairy like. So, this is what it's doing. Folks,
Jeez Louise.
this is what we're fighting against. This is what the strike is about. Do you want your Lord of the Rings show to look like this? Do you want this animatic be given to the cinematographer on set and say, hey, just shoot this shot? Or do you want John Howe to draw something for Andrew Lesnie and go and win some Oscars with some incredible cinematography and unique perspectives? Or
the answer is so clear.
Do you want AI generated, most basic, oh, we got to include a guy, a girl, a campfire, and a bench on a tree? I tell you, Andrew Lesnie would not frame a shot like that. John Howe would not draw a frame that looks like that. He would have an interesting perspective. AI assisted platform that empowers storytellers around the world. What our clients are saying, our creativity went through the roof. A better way to tell your story. That's that's what AI is promising the studios like Amazon. And I just showed you that Amazon loves AI, has been working on AI storyboarding for 10 years. And
yes,
these are the types
they
of
admitted
companies.
That.
This is what they're doing. Folks, it is not too far-fetched to believe that Amazon is potentially using AI in Rings of Power Season 2 right now.
Yes.
And then handing these cheap animatics, AI-drawn animatics, over to the cinematographers and say, just shoot this. Shut up and shoot the scene as you see it. With no perspective.
This is quite as likely as any other outcome, and we want to caveat that previous statement by saying we do not have concrete proof of that. This is just editorially speaking how one can connect the dots if one would assume to connect the dots in the most reasonable way. That is the most reasonable connection.
If they're using AI,
but we have no confirmation of this.
Tools like Amazon has been known to support.
Yep. Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Right.
Well, folks, I don't like it as much as anybody else likes it, and it would be cause for a fair amount of unhappy campers. Let's just put it that way. There would be a lot of folks who I feel in my alignment with the literary world, a lot of folks in the literary camp and everybody at Oxenmoot would be livid. And you know what? It's kind of like when you see one of those self-driving, self-automated cars that automatically stops itself in the middle of the road and is blocking 2 lanes, and won't budge and won't move, and people are trying to get past it. You know, you ask anybody on the street, oh, guess what? They're introducing automated cars. That's the new AI. And the person says, well, I'm not surprised. So I saw that on the national news today. So if somebody comes out and says, yeah, Amazon did use AI tools for Rings of Power Season 2, not only would people be literally angry, but a lot of people would also just be like, are you surprised?
Look, we already know that one of the reasons the writers are striking Amazon is because they had a mini room. They were paid for 6 weeks of worth instead of 6 months. The writers were not allowed on set. They were not on set to rewrite Celebrimbor when he was recast. They were not on set in New Zealand when the order for episodes went from 10 to 8. So the writers were shorted on this huge $1 billion production. And
yes, they were.
Why did they do that? Why were they shorted? Because someone at the studio potentially told the showrunners, hey, don't worry, we've got all these AI tools to help you guys do your job. We don't need the writers.
Don't worry, we've got these AI automobiles clogging traffic in the streets. They killed a dog. In the past couple of years, there's been 200.
So did my neighbor.
There's been
but
200 and something accidents with
let's be
automated
very
cars.
clear. I will argue with this. I will
I
argue
want to. I
this.
want to argue. I'm in an argumentative mood. Actually, I'm happy to
I'm
argue
telling you that
on the merits.
smart autopilot cars are way more safer than my drunk neighbor.
That's
And
possibly very true.
it's
That's just as likely as
human
anything. But
drivers are more dangerous than autopilots that have cameras and they're always watching. I'm just that's we cannot compare 200 accidents to the 20,000 accidents that happen with humans every year.
Then let us narrow the scope of our analogy and let's make it more fair for the conversation. Okay, I will do that for you. Let's narrow it down to greatest literary mind in the 20th century who has studied languages past and created languages present. Doesn't need any other modernization, and certainly a person like Tolkien, who created such a fantastic literary career. You could never, ever put it in the hands of a generative AI tool of any kind to be able to compete with his own imagination and to be able to stack level for level that creativity and that inspired level of vision. Do you know who got an inspired level of vision? Well, they got shelves full of Oscars. John Howe, Alan Lee, Peter Jackson, Sir Richard Taylor, and all the people working at the VFX team. All
we saw at Comic-Con.
Everybody. I'm telling you, Jim Rigel, okay? All those folks are the answer to generative AI. You hire the best creatives. All you got to do is hire and pay appropriately, compensate the best creatives, and you'll get better than any generative AI will ever give you.
Every step of the production process needs a human creative person. The storyboards need to be... I love John Howe. I'm glad they hired him for season 1, but keep hiring people of his caliber. The reason, look at this. Neil Gaiman would never hire an AI artist to make his graphic novel book. But he hired Colleen Duran, a Tolkien artist, and now it is, in 1 week, the most successful comic book Kickstarter of all time. $1.6 million in 1 week on Neil Gaiman's Good Omens, because it's written by humans, it's illustrated by humans, the cover art's done by humans, and we humans want to support human storytelling and human filmmaking. And so, yes, AI may make your job easier at some capacity, but when it comes to the creative process, like making adaptations of Lord of the Rings, doesn't really have a place in the production process of this. All right.
Agreed. And that puts a really good button on our show, doesn't it? Excellent. That puts a really good button on our show. Ladies and gentlemen, we really do want to thank you again for joining us once more this week at Torn Tuesday. Here, your one-stop shop, the greatest and most consistent, solid, and always open-handed Tolkien community on the interwebs. Come and join us on our Discord, join us on our message boards, and me, I'm QuickBeam2000, Clifford Broadway, over at Twitter and Instagram. If you want to find theonering.net on any of our socials, take out the dot and just look for the One Ring Net and you will find us. Follow us, click like, and subscribe on YouTube. I never say that, but it'd be great if you guys did. Lovely to see old friends, Brian, Monica, Otaku Senpai, Anonymous Girl, Durin 7th, Wheat Bix. What a great crowd. You've all been wonderful with us in the live chat. And Dan Bites, James, you guys are the best. Lots of love to you all. Please stay cool. Keep yourselves cool and relax and take good care of yourselves. Until next week, we'll be back here on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time for more mischief. And maybe next week we'll have a little more Green Dragon gossip. I hope. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Good night and good luck. Or better yet, buenos noches y buena suerte. Bye, everybody.
Bye. I really need Celebrating Board to have a relationship.